Hello and welcome back to Boring Dad Gaming, where today I'm going to be carrying on with Arcadie, Second Born. In the last episode, we sort of formed a bit of a plan that we're going to do. We've volunteered to be part of the sort of wall-breaching team that is going to have the most heavy fighting. So I'm sure our background in political science will be of great use there. We'll see how it goes. So let's carry on. 3 days later. It has now been 10 days since Fort Queenscliff has become your new home. You spent most of it... we should probably be training with the soldiers. Wary at first, the soldiers quickly took a liking to you and started sparring with you. You're having a light lunch today alone in your room. As you finish your meal with a refreshing sip of water, there is a knock at your door. It sounds 3 times in a solid and steady rhythm. Come in. Wilfred appears in the doorway. He's not wearing his full uniform, only the slacks and boots, a short-sleeved, form-fitting black shirt in place of the usual jacket.
Good afternoon, Your Highness,
he greets you without entering.
I'm ready for your sword training lesson.
Good, I was looking forward to it. You say with a smile. He nods.
I'll be waiting for you on the training grounds,
he states, then closes the door. On the training grounds. There is not much sun today, rays filtering sparsely through cottony clouds. Just as well. Exercising with the sun beaming down on you would make for an unpleasant afternoon. When you arrive in the training grounds, you find Wilfred busy chatting with a soldier, a longsword in his right hand. He seems to be in the middle of explaining something to the young man, his free hand pointing at the cutting edge of the weapon, while slowly rolling his right wrist. By the time you reach him, he's handed the sword back to the soldier, and the latter has departed after thanking him. When Wilfred notices you, instead of coming closer, he strides to the opposite side, towards the wooden fence encircling the training grounds. He proceeds to unbuckle the belt attached to his sword's scabbard. He then places his weapon against the fence, and retrieves 2 wooden swords that have been set aside on the ground. As he walks back towards you, he tosses one of them in your direction, and you catch it, purely on instinct.
Let's start with the basics. Show me a few moves.
You oblige, and as he retreats a few steps, you hold the sword up and take a few swings at thin air. Wilfred circles you, looks at you with his lips pressed together, hands behind his back, grasping his own training weapon.
Your stance is all wrong,
he declares suddenly. He steps behind you, kicks the sole of your right foot forward, then grabs your shoulders and pulls them back, making you stand a little straighter. He's teaching us. Let's keep looking forward, shifting to accommodate the new stance. He steps to the side, and as you glance his way, you notice him appraising you again with narrowed eyes.
All right, let's see how you fight.
Wilfred twirls the wooden sword in his hand as if to appraise its weight. Nodding to himself, he goes to stand a few feet opposite you. The heel of his right foot scrubs the earth in a circular motion, as if looking for purchase, and he glimpses down at it, brows drawn together in focus. When he raises his head again, it is to take a long, studying look at you. His gaze glides slowly over you with sharp focus, taking in each and every detail of your body and of the posture. It's drawn a moment to your hands, intently analysing the way you hold your weapon, and then to your feet, watching how you balance your weight. His blue eyes slide over you again, upwards this time, and lock with yours. Wilfred moves into a low guard, the point of his sword almost touching the earthy, dry ground, never breaking eye contact with you. You take a deep breath, adrenaline quickening your heartbeat. I think he's drawing us in, so let's wait for him to make the first move. You grip your sword, awaiting his first move. He stares at you, unblinking, and suddenly he feints to the left, and the point of his sword meets with your sternum.
Stop,
he says, withdrawing his weapon as you rub at the spot reflexively.
Again.
He assumes the same stance. You spar for a long time, stopping intermittently to catch your breath, and when Wilfred wants to instruct you on a specific point, he's very unhappy with your footwork. A while later, the sun starts piercing through the clouds more frequently, shining warm light down on you, and you soon start feeling uncomfortably hot and a little thirsty.
Wait,
Wilfred says as you position yourself for a new round. He walks away, props his training sword against the wooden fence, and reaches around it to grab a water skin. You follow him, and as you come to a stop next to him, he takes a long swig of water, and turning your direction, offers it to you. I take it. You accept it with a nod. You take a sip and the water is rather cool on your tongue, considering it has been sitting in the sun for some time. Next to you, Wilfred slides a hand through his hair, combing it back, but his right-sided fringe slips almost immediately back into place above his eyebrow. I think we're going to drink water in silence. I have a feeling he's going to speak first. You take another sip of water.
With more training, you could become quite a skilled fighter,
Wilfred says next to you. You glance his way, but fail to meet his gaze as it's presently locked on something in front of him, far off in the distance.
I'm certain you could achieve great things if you put your mind to it.
You blink. That was high praise coming from the commander. And truth be told, it is a rare occurrence for you to receive praise at all from anyone. People, including Wilfred, are usually too busy lauding Ariana's talents. Your parents included. Thank you, Sir Wilfred. Your words mean a lot to me. You say, heart swelling with pride and a wide smile spreading your lips. He mirrors your smile with a small one of his own.
It's only the truth.
He turns, facing forward again, and his smile fades away. A few minutes later, you resume training, armed with the same wooden training weapons. The afternoon ebbs away as you twist, parry, strike, and fail to touch anything but air as Wilfred keeps stepping effortlessly out of the way. This time, however, you keep moving forward, taking a large stride after him. Only something catches the tip of your foot and you lose balance. You manage to soften your fall by twisting before impact, hitting the ground with your back rather than your face. Fortunately, the earth is rather soft, and, aside from your surprise at meeting the ground, you don't feel pain anywhere.
Pay attention to the terrain,
Wilfred chastises you, although he does come closer, offering you his hand. Well, take his hand, why wouldn't we? We like Wilfred. You clasp his extended hand, letting him hoist you up to your feet. He pulls you up, and while you dust yourself, he declares,
We'll stop here for today. You must be tired.
You take a few minutes to gather your things, then leave the training grounds for the day. 5 days later. The courtyard is lively today. In the distance you can hear soldiers practicing, the noise of hundreds of wooden swords clashing in the air. By the gates you spot Ariana and Wilfred, seemingly engrossed in conversation. When they notice you, they both move closer. Hey, Boring, good morning, Ariana greets you. Her outfit is different, you notice, probably custom-tailored from the way it perfectly fits her tall frame. Over her uniform, a black velvet coat stops mid-thigh, its collars and cuffs a bright crimson shade, and an intricate leaf-shaped gold embroidery runs from the lapels to the tail ends of the garment. Hey yourself. I need to talk to you about something. Ariana walks closer still, and her expression somewhat closed off, she adds, in private. Of course. You're led to the room where the War Council took place almost 10 days ago. Wilfred steps into the room first, walking carefully around, pulling most of the curtains open and inspecting the darkness beyond the bookcase, is to the west side. Thank you, Sir Wilfred, Ariana says as the commander leaves the room, closing the door behind him. Silence fills the space a moment as you only look at each other. Your sister eventually comes to stand an arm's length away from you. Tell me, Boring, how much do you actually know about Aether? It's some kind of magic, isn't it? And only members of the Arcadie line can use it. Good, you know the gist of it. She looks down and reaches inside her coat. Let me show you something new. A sharp knife shines as she pulls it out of her belt. She raises her free, long-fingered hand, palm up facing you, then quickly slices it open, a red, bloody diagonal line appearing across her skin. She smirks at you, and you watch as a droplet of blood trails down her hand and wrist, disappearing into her sleeve. Give me your hand, she requests. Ooh, what are we going to do? I'm going to hesitate for a moment, but give her my hand eventually. We're not quite sure what she's doing. You hesitate a moment, but eventually put your hand palm up on top of hers, and she quickly drags the blade across your palm. The pain is sharp but quick, and before you can reflexively close your hand, Ariana clasps it against hers in a strong grip. You jump, an ache like 1,000 needles shooting through your arm, reaching your neck before exploding throughout your body. And when Ariana lets go, you're left feeling heady and dazed, white stars covering most of your field of vision. I shake my head and attempt to collect myself. Sorry for the little jolt, she says, half grinning. There's not much I could have done about it. Besides, it's already healed up. You look downward towards your hand. While you can still feel a tingle right under your skin, you realise there is no hint of an injury. Aether's fancy like that, Ariana comments in lieu of giving an explanation. Perhaps sensing your restlessness, she decides to clarify. I gave you a bit of Aether. Walking away to place the bloodied knife on the table, she adds, is not enough for you to be able to use it offensively, but it should make it easier for you to, make lamps? She smiles, pointing a finger towards the chandelier. She comes closer again. There's a man in Goldridge called Nathaniel. He could teach you how to actually use it. Didn't that weaken you? You're going to need Aether in the battle. Against Stanislas. She tosses a hand back, eyes to the ceiling. Oh, that was nothing. Believe me, I've plenty of Aether left. She looks back at you. But thank you for your concern. Why did you share some Aether with me anyway? Why not? It's not like I have anybody else to share it with, she states, an admission that seems to sadden her. She looks at you for a moment. You know I love you, right? She says, and her lips thin into a forlorn line. I know I haven't been a perfect sister, but I want to be the best possible leader for our kingdom. And with you by my side, I think I can do that. Her gaze is set, and her mind made as she declares, just as mother ruled alongside father, I want to rule Arcadie with you. I would be honoured to rule by your side. Her hands settle over her hips. Before any of that happens, however, we have a traitor to take down and Cortland to deal with. You leave the room together. Wilfred is right outside, probably awaiting Ariana. So Wilfred, Ariana begins, we should... A soldier comes barrelling down the hallway, cutting her off. Soon 3 more follow, and you notice a loud clatter rising from the courtyard. Booming voices calling for a medic. What's happening?
Ariana, stay here,
Wilfred urges uselessly, as Ariana is already sprinting away.
Ariana!
He calls again, but she disappears behind a corner. Run after Ariana, I want to know what's going on. You launch yourself after Ariana, and you can hear Wilfred's displeased growl behind you. In the courtyard, a large crowd has coalesced around something or someone you can't make out. Soldiers put an end to their huddling only when Ariana orders them to stand aside. You glimpse Cyril in the middle, and in front of him a soldier in light armour, head low and hair dishevelled, dirty as if he just rolled in the dirt. Sir Cyril, you have to help him, the soldier pleads, voice shaky and hoarse, in between erratic breaths. Lieutenant Thomas, they got him.
Of course I'll help, Cyril says, but I need you to start from the beginning, Philip.
I wanted to fight. I wanted to help,
the soldier rasps out.
But he wouldn't let me. He ordered me to run, I swear.
Cyril reaches for him, steadies him with hands over his shoulders.
Philip, I need you to calm down. Take a deep breath and tell me exactly what happened and where it happened.
Philip, the soldier, takes a shaky breath, swallows hard.
We were patrolling the eastern side of the castle,
he explains, and it seems his training and professionalism are starting to kick in.
Lieutenant Thomas and I, we thought we saw someone in the forest, and then they just sprung out of nowhere.
Who's they?
Soldiers from the castle, Stanislas's men, 3 of them. I was ready to fight, but Lieutenant Thomas pushed me away. He ordered me to run to come get you, Sir Cyril.
He stares into the commander's eyes, face contorted with guilt.
You followed orders,
Cyril says encouragingly, his hand still steadying the soldier.
That's a good thing, Philip. What about the rest of your squad? Do you know what happened to them?
The soldier shakes his head heavily.
They were back at camp down south. I didn't run into them on my way back.
It's all right. Thank you very much, Philip. You've been a tremendous help.
Cyril turns around, craning his neck. As if on cue, a soldier with a white armband walks closer and takes Philip off of Cyril's hands.
Thank you, Mark. Captain Jonas, he calls immediately, and while most soldiers start dispersing to give him room to manoeuvre, an officer comes closer, probably the aforementioned captain. I need you to gather your team and stand ready by the gates. We leave in 15 minutes.
The captain nods and flies away, and soldiers scramble around in a momentary frenzy. They soon clear out, however, seemingly returning to their respective posts. Cyril moves to leave, but Ariana intercepts him. Sir Cyril?
Your Majesty, he responds, stopping in his tracks and swivelling around to face her. I apologize for not noticing you.
He gives a quick, almost reflexive bow.
The reconnaissance team, keeping watch over the castle, has been attacked, and at least one of its members is missing. The rest of the squad's status is unknown. I'm gathering men to go and investigate and bring back whatever survivors we can find.
Cyril glances around at the soldiers nearby, but none of them is near enough to hear your conversation.
We don't know whether this was just an unfortunate coincidence, or if Stanislas is actually planning an attack.
You'll be going in person? Ariana sounds sceptical. Cyril nods and a blonde strand of hair falls in front of his eyes.
Of course.
Is that really necessary? We need you here. He looks away for a split second.
While it isn't strictly necessary, I'm sure you understand that one needs to lead by example, and not hide away at the first whiff of danger.
Ariana nods. All right, but please be careful, Sir Cyril. Let me know as soon as you're back. And with that, she departs. Cyril's copper eyes flit to yours, almost by accident, and they grow wider for a second.
Your Highness, I'm sorry I didn't notice you earlier.
I'm unbelievingly offended, I jest.
Let's joke with him. I'm unbelievably offended. I'm so sorry, he replies, smiling. I apologize for not being able to speak longer. I must get ready to leave.
Can I go with you? The smile that spreads on his lips is as amused as it is disbelieving.
While I'm sure that finding you in the field would make Stanislas's men very happy, it would have the polar effect on us.
His smile fades and he adds, taking a step closer to you.
Stanislas may not go out of his way for me, but he definitely will to get to you.
All right, well, good luck, Sir Cyril.
He smiles and gives a swift nod. Thank you, Your Highness,
he says before departing. Several hours later. Night comes, and with it the sparkle of stars high up in the black void that is tonight's sky. You watch them a moment, their twinkle, a captivating sight. Your mother used to tell you tall tales of long-dead warriors descended from the starry expanse. Legends have it that, aeons ago, the very first member of your bloodline, able to weathe aether, had travelled forth from worlds unknown, built Arcadie from the ground up, and defended it from its enemies with their almighty powers. Depending on who was telling the tale, it was either a young man with a red scarf, having mastery over all elements, or a ravishingly beautiful woman, long blonde hair flowing in the wind as she rained down lightning from the skies. Some even preferred the version with two twin siblings, fighting in tandem, and as elegant on the battlefield as in the ballroom. Maybe there was a nugget of truth in there somewhere. While you've been contemplating the firmament, the air has turned somewhat chilly, but not enough for you to feel cold, except at the very ends of your fingertips. The courtyard is mostly silent around you, soldiers retiring to the barracks for the night. Only those on guard duty remain, walking slowly through their patrol routes, chattering only in hushed tones. One lone figure catches your attention, hands behind his back. Wilfred is going around the courtyard, speaking with the soldiers. He ambles closer, coming to a stop near you.
Your Highness, he says, adding after a beat, good evening.
Good evening, Sir Wilfred.
I am patrolling the fort, he states. Why don't you join me?
Yes, all right. He nods and resumes walking. You quickly fall into step with him.
One of Cyril's lieutenants usually makes the rounds, he explains unbidden, but it's good to check on the troops yourself from time to time.
Any news of Cyril? He quickly shakes his head.
I don't expect to hear anything before the morn.
He meets your eyes, and his expression is mostly placid.
You needn't worry about Cyril. He won't endanger himself if he can at all avoid it.
That's not exactly reassuring.
Perhaps, but it is the truth.
I say nothing. You come to a stop near the hearth of the forge, now extinguished. Its embers are vacillating red specks twinkling in the dark. Still, the night is not as cold in its vicinity. He observes it thoughtfully, takes a few unhurried steps towards it. He extends a right arm tentatively as if to touch the warmer air.
I must have gotten used to the warmth of the south,
you hear him ponder, and there is a slight sour edge to his voice. You're originally from the north, aren't you? He looks back at you, surprised you heard him.
I am. I was born and raised in Einberg, near our border with Coltland.
And weren't you commander in the north 2 years ago? He starts walking again, and you follow by his side.
I was, for 5 years, he replies. Most of that time was spent fighting off Cortland's incursions. It's only near the end of my tenure that I was granted enough resources to go on the offensive. We managed to drive them away from the border, but overall it was only mildly successful.
His gait is slower now, perhaps because most of his focus has been drawn inward, lost in his memories.
Cortlanders are relentless, I'll give them that, he says, and the scorn in his voice is unmissable. But once they realize defeat is near, they always end up retreating to their underground cities, like rats with their tails between their legs.
Do rats put their tails between their legs? It's normally dogs, isn't it? He glances your way.
Their cities are hidden deep underground, burrowed in the snow, he explains. I did manage to track them there, but our supplies didn't allow us to withstand the freezing cold long enough for a siege.
Why did Stanislas become commander in the north instead of you, then? His expression does not give much away.
Stanislas was originally in charge of the south, but he kept trying to reason with the tribes instead of bringing them back in line.
He faced forward again and brings his hands up, crossing his arms.
Your mother thought it was time to try a different approach with Cortland, since we were at a standstill after years of war, and dealing with the tribes definitely warranted a more forceful approach.
Why do you think Stanislas really turned against us? He doesn't immediately reply, and you walk in silence for a moment.
I don't know, he says eventually. Perhaps something changed with him while he was in Cortland. Perhaps the Cortlanders offered him some sort of deal. Or perhaps he was always going to turn against Arcadie, and it was only a matter of time before he did.
He shakes his head.
The crux of the matter is, it doesn't matter. Stanislas is now the enemy. We don't need to make it more complicated than that.
He stops near the stables and takes a peek inside. You spot your horse near the entrance. When you look back towards him, he stands motionless, his blue eyes trained on you.
Do you miss your life at the castle?
As soon as the question has left his lips, his pensive eyes trail elsewhere. I miss my parents. He nods solemnly.
I'm sorry you've lost so much in so little time,
he says, still not looking at you.
Stanislas will pay for what he's done, but it won't be bringing anything nor anyone back.
He resumes walking, slowly until you've caught up to him. As you walk in companionable silence, an idle question forms itself in your mind. I still don't think we're going to be romancing Wilfred, sorry. So whether he is attached or not doesn't matter enough to ask. He stops in the middle of the courtyard, watches as a soldier passes by, then turns towards you.
It's getting rather late and cold, he declares. I'll accompany you back to your room if you wish.
Oh, God. It's all right, I'll go back by myself.
He nods. Good night, then, Your Highness.
You leave the courtyard and retreat to your room. The next morning. You wake up with a start, and for a hazy second your mind frantically scrambles to figure out what tore you out of your slumber. There is loud shouting coming from the courtyard beyond your window, disturbing the quiet of the early morning. It is not distress shouting, however, but more of a loud announcement meant to stir the garrison into, perhaps not action, but at least wakefulness. It seems to have been effective at that, seeing as you're now fully awake. Let's hastily get dressed and go outside to see what's happening. You jump out of bed and swiftly change out of your nightgown and into your uniform. You're not certain your jacket's buttons are properly lined up, but that will have to do. There is a cold breeze in the courtyard. A layer of dew still suspended in the air clings to your skin and hair as you proceed under the dusty purple sky. Your breath is dimly visible as you walk, following the voices that lead you into the gate's vicinity. Horses and soldiers are standing around, and despite the barely rising sun, you make out a bright spot of blonde hair, immediately recognizing Cyril.
Your Highness,
he says, as his weary gaze meets yours. It almost immediately flits back to the soldiers around him.
Jonas, get a new reconnaissance team ready as soon as possible. The castle must not be left without surveillance.
Half the soldiers file away after Jonas, and the other half remains, fussing over someone with a bandaged head. You recognize Lieutenant Thomas, whom you met a few days ago. Sir Cyril! You hear Ariana behind you. You're back. What happened? Wilfred stands right beside her, his freshly washed, still damp hair glistening in the dim sunlight.
It would be best if Lieutenant Thomas told you himself.
Cyril responds, his hand steadying the aforementioned man.
Let's convene in the council room.
You proceed back inside the fort, through its long hallways, barely lit by vacillating candles in the soft dawn light. Your boots' heels click loudly against the stone, waking up anyone who has not yet been stirred awake by the previous commotion. The soldiers stay outside as your group, comprised of Thomas, Cyril, Wilfred, Ariana, and yourself, shuts itself inside the council room. The aether chandelier casts an orange, conspiratorial glow around the space, and while the open curtains let some of the sun's rays filter through, it's not enough to chase away the shadow of distress from Thomas's face. Cyril drags a chair out for Thomas, tugging it away from the table to plop it down in the middle of the room, and the lieutenant lands heavily on it. The previously white bandage wound around his black hair is yellow and red above his right eye, and there is a crimson gash right at the edge of his jaw, but his brown eyes, while clearly sunken with fatigue, still shine with the energy of a determined man. The rest of you remain standing as he starts relaying the events he went through, hands on his knees, back slightly bent forward. "I believe you already know this, Your Majesty," he begins, locking eyes with Ariana and nodding respectfully. "I was taken captive by Stanislas's men yesterday morning, a few hours before noon. 3 of Stanislas's men jumped us while we were on patrol, Philip and I. I faced him to give him a head start to Philip, allowing him to run, but I was eventually overwhelmed," as was evident by his wounds. He links his fingers together, his gaze trailing to the stone floor. "I was taken before Stanislas." He pauses, brow furrowed, and Ariana crosses her arms. His right knee starts bouncing quickly as he resumes. "I fully expected to be tortured for information and then left to die." You can see his Adam's apple moving up and down as he swallows. "Instead, he ordered that my wounds be tended to." His head shakes, and his clasp around his hands tightens. "I was treated with all the honours befitting a guest, rather than an enemy soldier." Ariana paces away, closer to the stone wall where a large painting has been hung. Arcadie's verdant landscapes have been exquisitely captured on the canvas, and the sunrise peeking through the windows casts lines of orange light across the green plains. Thomas doesn't resume speaking until the Queen's attention returns to him. "I was then brought back before him in the castle's throne room. The Cotland envoys were still there, a man and a woman." Ariana scoffs, her arm still tightly crossed over her chest while she walks back towards the centre of the room, and Thomas's eyes widen a moment. "Whatever were their names again?" she wonders. Miskier and Valmar, Wilfred recalls, distaste evident in his voice. "Yes, they introduced themselves," Thomas says. He touches his bandage almost reflexively and pushes it up a little away from his eye. "Stanislas declared that." He glances at Ariana again, and his leg stops bouncing as he regards her carefully, as if watching for any minute change in her expression. "He declared what?" Ariana asks impatiently. He declared that he had nothing against the soldiers of Arcadie, or any ill will towards the kingdom itself," Thomas replies. "That his war was against the Arcadie royal line and not its people." His gaze drops to the floor again. "He said he wanted to usher in an era of peace and freedom for the good of the people of Arcadie. That we, the soldiers of Arcadie, were all welcome by his side, free to join him at any time." He talks slowly, chancing careful glances at Ariana at the very end of every sentence. "He said it was time we stopped waging senseless and selfish wars, that the royal family had made its people shed enough blood and tears in the pursuit of glory, power, and greed." Thomas's eyes are glued to his feet now. When you turn to look at your sister, she's standing very still, very straight, her eyes boring into the man sitting a few paces away. "Lieutenant Thomas," Ariana says, words charged with the ire bubbling below her false phlegm. And Thomas jumps, blinking quickly as he meets her icy gaze. "You sound quite taken with Stanislas." I'm sure he's only relaying everything Stanislas said as accurately as possible," Cyril supplies very calmly. "Knowing his exact rhetoric will allow us to efficiently refute it." Ariana says nothing for a beat. "Well, in that case, thank you for relaying all this information, Lieutenant," she declares, although she doesn't sound entirely convinced. "Of course, Your Majesty," Thomas says very quickly, unhooking his hands and wiping his sweaty palms on his thighs. As if remembering something, he slides a hand inside his jacket and pulls out a white envelope from his inner pocket. "Stanislas asked me to give you this," he explains, standing to hand the item to the Queen. Cyril seizes it before Ariana does and looks it over carefully. It is held closed by a blue wax seal, the colour used by the commanders of Arcadie in their correspondence. Cyril looks Ariana's way, and when she nods, he breaks the seal and carefully unfolds the letter.
To Her Majesty, Queen Ariana d'Arcadie, he reads in a clear, level voice.
That's a good start. Ariana balances her weight on her right leg, arms still crossed tightly, fingers digging into her biceps and eyes riveted to Cyril as he reads on.
I hope that Lieutenant Thomas has been returned to you safe and sound. I do not wish harm on the soldiers of our kingdom nor on its people. I hereby peacefully ask for your surrender. Let Thomas be the proof that I am not after senseless bloodshed. Upon your surrender, your parents' bodies will be returned to you, so that they can be buried according to your family's customs.
What? Ariana's arms return to her sides in a flash, and she tears the letter out of Cyril's grip. Our parents' bodies? She repeats, loudly, her voice a furious shrill. She marches towards Thomas, and he flinches back into his seat, wide-eyed. What has he done with them? Is he parading them around the castle? Did he cut off their heads, stick them on pikes? Answer me. I don't know. His palms are up, and he looks about, ready to pounce. Oh, I didn't say them. Ariana turns away, face red with rage. I will rend him limb from limb, she vows, striding across the room and opening the letter again. I say nothing. I don't want to sound like I'm defending him. Our differences can be resolved with minimal loss of life, she reads on with a mocking tone. Let us turn together, a new page in Arcadie's history. Should you surrender in the weak, no harm will come to you or your brother. How magnanimous of him, she scoffs, and then abruptly stops in her tracks. She pulls the paper closer to her eyes, staring at it in silence. When she slowly resumes reading, her brow furrows deeper with every word she pronounces. Please convey my warmest regards to Boring. He is your best asset in the pursuit of a peaceful resolution. As she finishes reading, her voice is strained and incredulous. You suddenly find yourself the unwitting new centre of attention. Wilfred's expression is unreadable, and Cyril shoots you a round-eyed glance, right before Ariana explodes. What in the world is this supposed to mean? Her furious eyes find you in an instant, letter crumpled in her fist. Well, yeah, we we kind of sided with him a bit outside the room, didn't we? When we were sort of saying we weren't in favour of war. So how do we best get out of this one? I don't agree with Stanislas, but it would be ideal if we could resolve this peacefully. What? Do you even listen to yourself? She snaps, disbelieving as she skirts closer. He killed our parents!
Stanislas's intentions are transparent.
Cyril takes a smooth step forward, locking eyes with your sister. His gaze is unwavering as he continues.
It would serve his purpose rather well if there were to be rumours that Boring was on his side, which, of course, is nonsense.
Ariana's nose wrinkles a moment, and she looks back at you, letter still crumpled in her hand. But then she breathes out, smooths the letter back, and reads through it again. I want to see what our relationship with her at the moment is. Oh, it's been dropping hard, hasn't it? It started at 79, and it's now down to 63. Wilfred likes us, and we're building a good relationship with Cyril as well. Status. Well, it's not that different, but we're edging more towards friendly and bold. We've maybe gone a bit more towards playful, because I think our serious was higher before. Oh, we got 39% of swordsmanship now. Politics and tactics, 59%. Aether mastery is 10%, that's new. And Aether charge, 20%, so that's both new. Still slightly on the pacifist side. Sir Cyril? She swivels back towards the blonde commander. What will you do with Lieutenant Thomas? Cyril doesn't answer immediately.
What do you mean, Your Majesty?
He's obviously compromised. We can't have him spewing Stanislas's nice-sounding lies to the rest of your troops. His gaze scrutinizes Ariana, then flits to a clearly alarmed Thomas, then back again.
What are you suggesting?
Put him in a cell, she replies, for the time being. Thomas shoots up from his chair. Your Majesty, please. I've never been anything but loyal to the crown.
Thomas, please settle down,
Cyril says, treading closer to the lieutenant. He now stands between Ariana and Thomas, a physical barrier between the two, and you can't help but notice there is something very deliberate in his relaxed stance.
Your Majesty, I do agree that Thomas needs some rest away from the rest of the troops, but that rest should be had in his personal quarters, not in a cell.
He'd be able to chat with the castle staff in his personal quarters, Wilfred chimes in, arms crossed. Putting him in a cell is a much safer choice. Until we've dealt with Stanislas.
Why don't we just dispose of him? You can actually play this as a full-on psychopath, can't you? I think he should go back to his quarters. I agree with Cyril. And blabber out with half the staff about how great Stanislas is, Ariana shoots back. Certainly not. There is a short, tense lull in the conversation that Thomas decides to break. Commander Stanislas does speak the truth, after all. You're discussing my fate as if I weren't here, treating me and your men like pawns in your schemes. Cyril stares wordlessly at his lieutenant, and when Thomas opens his mouth to speak again, he immediately cuts him off. Thomas? There is an unspoken warning in Cyril's firm tone, and Thomas's mouth snaps shut, his eyes rounder. Enough. Cyril turns to face Ariana. Please forgive him, Your Majesty. He's been through an ordeal. Ariana fixes her eyes on the commander a moment. Then her green gaze flits to Thomas behind him. Put him in a cell, Ariana says with finality. Ariana is the first to leave, Wilfred escorting Thomas out next, probably to a holding cell. When only you and Cyril remain, he lets out a short breath, and his hand disappears into his blonde locks as he combs them out of his face. Oh, it could have gone worse, he says to no one in particular. Do you think Thomas will be all right? Of course. His expression is sombre. It doesn't suit him. I'll personally be making sure of that. He walks to you and accompanies you as you both head to the door. Hand on the handle, ready to open it, he pauses a moment and slides a glance your way. Are you free this evening? He asks. Perhaps you'd enjoy having dinner with me. A smile spreads across his lips as he fully turns towards you, his fingers not leaving the handle. A nice meal in good company would be a welcome distraction. We're going to. Just what is going to be the tone of our acceptance? I never say no to the prospect of good food. You say cheerfully. That's a policy I can get behind. I'll be seeing you tonight then. Please come find me in my study a little before dinner time. With that, you both exit the council room and go your separate ways. As agreed upon in the morning, when dinner time comes around, you go look for Cyril in his study. You find him sitting behind his desk, presently invaded by stacks of parchment. He greets you with a smile. Your Highness, you're right on time. He looks refreshed, his cheeks rosy and his complexion smoother. He signs the document before him and then puts his pen down, standing up and walking around his desk to come stand in front of you. Let's go have dinner then. Cyril's quarters are located only a short distance away from his study. As you enter, you're greeted by a rectangular wooden table in the middle of a well-decorated room, a brightly coloured sofa in its corner, and a green, tall, potted plant next to a closed door. There is an impassive man waiting inside, clad in black and white, his brown hair, small ringlets against his forehead, and he bows respectfully as you enter. He takes his leave almost immediately, however. Please take a seat. Cyril invites you, pulling out a white cushioned chair for you, before going to the opposite side of the table. He only sits down once you do. I hope you've had a good day, what happened in the early morning notwithstanding. It's difficult to just forget about it. I know, but let's focus on enjoying the meal, for now. His subsequent smile is warm, his cheeks dimpling as you look at him over the dinnerware, white and rimmed with gold, set upon the table. You both watch as who you infer to be the butler returns, a dark wine bottle in his hand. He shuffles over to Cyril's side, angles the bottle so as to allow him to read through its label, and when the commander nods, the man pours him a glass, the wrist twisting expertly. Would you like a glass as well, Your Highness? Cyril asks. Are we a drinker? I guess this is asking us. Yes, I've had wine before and I enjoy it. The butler approaches and pours red wine into the crystal glass to your right. You give it a taste and it has a distinct aroma of raspberries and mulberries, dark and spicy. Its aroma transports you to an autumnal forest, the fragrance of truffles and fallen leaves hitting you as you swirl the liquid in your mouth, and it is smooth, yet rich as you swallow. It's quite good, isn't it? Cyril raises his own glass. Let's drink to Arcadie's victory in the upcoming battle. He swirls the wine around his glass before taking a sip. The butler departs, closing the door behind him. Ah, the taste takes me back, he says. Or perhaps it was all this talk of Stanislas this morning, but I distinctly remember the first time I had a glass of wine, or rather, a whole bottle of it. His tone is suddenly amused.
We had just been accepted into the Southern Military Academy, and I had managed to rope Wilfred and Stanislas into raiding the wine cellar while everybody else was asleep.
Stanislas, as in Stanislas Devol?
He blinks. Yes, we were, all three of us, in the same class.
He considers you a moment, adding carefully,
Perhaps I shouldn't speak of this.
No, it's all right. Please continue.
The liquor in the wine cellar was part of some older officer's personal collection. Between 3 bored 18-year-olds, however, we managed to make quite a dent in it. They didn't even catch us the first night, but eventually we got sloppy. Drunk and discreet don't really go together. We didn't get off scot-free, of course. The officer screamed at us until he was hoarse, and then screamed some more every time we burst out laughing while running around the yard as punishment.
His light laugh doesn't last long. I feel like it all happened a lifetime ago. His pensive gaze drifts upwards towards the ceiling, and he sips more of his wine. What kind of person was Stanislas back then? Cyril observes you for a moment.
He was personable.
Personable? How so?
Our conversations tended to be interesting.
His gaze drifts away.
We weren't the closest of friends, that would have been him and Wilfred, but I enjoyed getting into idle debates with him.
He looks back at you.
Stanislas always was an idealist. Unfortunately, it's a trait that seems to have taken to its extreme.
It's a trait he seems to have taken to its extreme. I mean, although the family do like war, Stanislas is right on that. I mean, the sense I get is that they mainly defend themselves from incursion, like the ones who came across the sea. This is the northern tribes. They never sort of pushed them back into their territory. They just defended against raids. In the south, I think the similar was true. So it doesn't seem like they court war, necessarily. So I'm not going to say that maybe there's some truth to what Stanislas is saying. I've started to maybe come around on that. But I wish there was a way to avoid an all-out war.
So do I, but please remember that Stanislas is keen on dethroning Ariana by any means necessary.
Was Wilfred the same back then?
How do you mean?
You know, duty-driven and broody.
He nods with a grin. That he was. Although he did also have quite the impulsive streak back then. Stanislas used to do a good job at talking him down.
I don't need to know how old he is. The door opens. The butler is back with the entree. He lays the food down carefully, his motions measured and precise. You're served little tarts stuffed with mushrooms and rich cream, and they smell delicious. Why have we got an option grayed out? The butler departs just as he came, in silence. You dine while discussing various topics, nothing of particular importance, both of you more focused on the richly flavoured dish than your conversation. You finish your meal, and while the butler takes care of clearing the table, Cyril invites you to sit on the pine green sofa. So I think because we haven't pursued him romantically that we can't sit right next to him. So we'll sit at a polite distance. You sit at the opposite edge of the sofa. Soon you're brought steaming cups of tea. It tastes minty and you detect a note of honey and an aftertaste of jasmine. You drink the hot beverage, partaking in some sweet pastries the butler brings along before wishing Cyril a good night, signalling the end of his service for the day, and Cyril thanks him. A moment of companionable silence passes, and Cyril seems rather content, hot cup clasped in his hands. His outstretched legs meet at the ankles, and he lets himself slump backwards a little, settling into the sofa's plushiness. I think maybe we'll warm up towards him. He doesn't need to keep calling me Your Highness. We can be more first-name terms than that. You can just call me by my name, you say. There's no need to keep referring to me as Your Highness.
Oh, very well, Boring.
Do you have any siblings?
I do. I have a younger sister, Elise, and a younger brother, Mark. Elise is in Arrington, acting as our ambassador, while Mark is an officer in the peacekeeping force.
What about your parents?
They keep themselves busy administrating our gold mines.
He looks your way a moment and clarifies.
The Lavignac family owns most of the mines to the west.
Doesn't that make your family one of the wealthiest in the kingdom?
It does,
he replies, the corner of his mouth upturning. After a while, Cyril stands up in a fluid motion. You do the same, mostly on instinct, and stand opposite him while he regards you with a sincere smile etched on his lips.
Thank you for the company.
he says. Let me take you back to your room. You probably need to rest. Something. What does that imply? Something. I'm not entirely sure what anchors me in place. Is that a romantic thing, or is there like something more conspiratorial going on? Or I'm intrigued by that. I mean, the other options are obviously we go back to our room, but why would something anchor me in place? I'm going to choose it, and we'll see where it goes. Mainly, I'm intrigued to see what happens. You feel at ease in his company. His silvery voice, his soft smile. Okay, it is a romantic thing. His soft smile, the smell of tea, the taste of roasted oranges. It all brings back a shade of normalcy you hadn't realized you craved. Is everything all right? He asks, and there it is again. Real concern in his tone, in the small tilt of his blonde eyebrow. Maybe let's try and befriend him. He's a nice guy, obviously. Not necessarily a romantic interest, but, we won't rule it out either. I feel at ease in your company. His smile widens. That's kind of you to say. My door is always open in case you ever want to spend more time together. Spending more time together, the prospect is alluring. You glance at his honey-coloured eyes. Sorry, you glancing at his honey-coloured eyes turns into a stare, and he blinks, a quick succession of eyelashes fluttering. Is there anything else you need, Boring? He asks, his smile frozen across his face. No, I should go back. All right, I wish you a good night then. And with that, you return to your room for the night. 1 week later. And I think actually we're going to leave it there. Time has advanced on. It's getting up in length, this video, and I think probably we're going to sort of head into like a next chapter sort of thing that would be good to do in a single episode. So we'll leave it there for now. So thanks very much for joining me for this third episode now, isn't it? Yeah, what am I talking about? Third episode of Arcadie Secondborn. I hope you're still enjoying it. I'm still enjoying reading it and seeing where the story's going to go. And I think we're probably about a week away from starting the siege, if I've got the timing down right. So we're getting closer. So if you did enjoy it, please do hit the thumbs up button on the video. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think about this series. Subscribe if you've not done so already to the channel. That'd be amazing. And I'll hope to see you next time for the next installment of Arcadie Secondborn. Bye for now.